national sovereignty, they say, is a social injustice. According to the sustainabilists, it is a social injustice for some to have prosperity if others do not. It is a social injustice for some to be bosses and others to be merely workers. Under the sustainabilist system, private property is an evil that is used simply to create wealth for a few. So too is business ownership. Profits, they tell us, are made at the expense of the people. In short, social equity is a forced utopia with promises of health care for all, jobs for all, housing for all, and equality for all. So the reason the government refuses to secure our borders is because it is committed to imposing sustainable development. The reason Congress refused to listen to your pleas against centralized health care is because it is committed to sustainable development. The reason our local governments are imposing redevelopment and comprehensive development plans that include public housing projects, forced open space, and restrictions and controls on energy and water and population growth is because a sustainable development social equity plank. This is why we say that sustainable development is at the root of literally all other issues we are fighting. Economic prosperity, the second circle. Sustainable development's economic policy is based on one overriding premise, that the wealth of the world was made at the expense of the poor. It dictates that if the conditions of the poor are to be improved, wealth must first be taken from the rich. You, by the way, are the rich. Keep that in mind. Consequently, sustainable development's economic policy is based not on private enterprise and open markets, but on public-private partnerships or government-sanctioned monopolies. And I'll give you many, many more details on public-private partnerships in a couple of minutes. And the third plank, ecological integrity. To understand the power of the transformation of society under sustainable development, consider this quote from the UN's Biodiversity Treaty, which was also introduced at the 1992 Earth Summit. Quote, "Nature has an integral set of different values, cultural, spiritual, and material, where humans are but one strand in nature's web, and all living creatures are considered equal. Therefore, the natural way is the right way, and human activity should be molded along nature's rhythms." This quote lays down the ground rules for the entire sustainable development agenda. It says humans are nothing special, just one strand in the nature of things, or put another way, humans are simply a biological resource. Sustainablest policy is to oversee any issue in which man interacts with nature, which of course is literally everything. This is necessary, sustainabilists say, because humans only defile nature. In other words, sustainabilists view man as nothing more than a swarm of locusts which swoops down on nature and sucks it clean until there's nothing left. Nothing good comes from man, according to sustainabilist doctrine. Do you think you own and control your private property? Then consider this quote from the report of the 1976 UN's Habitat I conference, which said, quote, "Land cannot be treated as an ordinary asset, controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market. Private land ownership is also a principal instrument of accumulation and concentration of wealth, therefore contributes to social injustice," end quote. The fact is, Agenda 21 is a blueprint to completely change our society to a top-down, planned central economy in a strange mixture of socialism, fascism, and corporatism. To convince Americans to accept it required something that we would have to sacrifice our natural rights voluntarily. How would we do that? The answer was environmental Armageddon. You must sacrifice freedom to protect the planet. It's urgent, we're told. So the urgency is on. Global warming and climate change are feeding the hysteria. There's no time to consider things like individual concerns, wants, and needs. Selfish, cries the sustainabilists. We must save the environment. Go green. Get out of your cars. Stop using energy. Sacrifice. Cut your carbon footprint or perish. And so, federal and state governments, working hand in hand with a horde of non-governmental organizations, private groups with personal political agendas, force passage of rules and regulations that are passed down to local communities. But, say your local officials, none of that UN socialist stuff is true. Just conspiracy theories of right-wing radicals. We're just creating the tools necessary in a local effort to manage growth and development for our community, they say. Have you heard these? They consider this quote from J. Gary Lawrence, a planner for the city of Seattle and an advisor to the President's Council on Sustainable Development. He said, quote, participating in a UN advocating planning process would very likely bring out many who would actively work to defeat any elected official. Any elected official undertaking local Agenda 21. So, we will call our process something else, such as comprehensive planning, growth management, or smart growth. End quote. Local indeed. Sustainable development is the process by which America is being reorganized around the central principle of state collectivism using the environment as bait. The best way to understand what sustainable development actually is can be found by discovering what is not sustainable. Maurice Strong, Secretary General of the UN's Earth Summit in 1992, said, quote, current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class, that's you again, involving high meat intake, use of fossil fuels, appliances, home and work air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable.